Welcome, fellow wanderers. I am Bandwidth Slayer, and today I'd like to begin the first of a series of videos covering the Final Fantasy Pixel remasters, beginning with the original. Now, these games and their roles in the history of this franchise and the JRPG space at large have been discussed ad nauseum, but I've seen comparatively little fanfare surrounding this recent release. I'd like to take the opportunity to give my thoughts and raise some discussion around them in sequential order, beginning with the original. Now, for the purposes of this video, I will not discuss this game's role in history or its significance in that respect. There's really nothing I can say that you haven't heard before about that. Rather, I think it would be interesting to look at the original Final Fantasy as a standalone game on its own merits, along with this version of it in particular. After all, unless you purchase the limited release physical collection of these Pixel remasters, which by the way, I had to import off PlayAsia, it wasn't even released stateside beyond this wonderful Square Enix website store, you must purchase these games as individual downloads. These games were even released individually in sequential order rather than all at once. Now clearly, Square Enix wants us to judge these remasters as individual standalone games. Personally, I think it would be more interesting to look at them that way anyway. The premise here is rather simple, and for most of the story it remains as such. There's not even a name for the setting in which this game takes place, and get used to that by the way for these first few Final Fantasies. You are assigned with creating 4 party members who are said to be the 4 Warriors of Light, heroes of prophecy assigned to restore the Crystals of Light and bring peace to the land in so doing. Now in order to win favor of the King of Cornelia, you must rescue his daughter from the rogue knight Garland. Upon dispatching him and bringing the fair maiden to safety, you have proven your legitimacy as the Warriors of Light, and a bridge is built to allow you to access where you need to go. From here, there isn't much to say on story for a while. Travel the land from A to B as needed until the 4 fiends tainting the 4 crystals are defeated. Hang out with Matoya, not that Matoya, sorry. Beat up Astos, Nomura hadn't got a job at Square Enix just quite yet. And learn a little about the civilization that fell to these creatures before you showed up. Alright, spoiler time for a bit. Skip ahead if you'd rather see how things close out for yourself. So, upon restoring the 4 crystals, their power centralizes back in the Chaos Shrine where you struck down Garland. The centralized energy somehow sends you back 2,000 years into the past, where Garland is somehow hanging out. Now, turns out, those 4 fiends you destroyed came from this period in time and were sent to the future by Garland. You see, when you killed Garland right before he could die, he was sent to this point in time in the past to recover. At this moment, he powers up and becomes Chaos, creating the 4 fiends in the process, who he then sends into the future with his own power, thus creating a time loop in which Garland keeps being revived and keeps sending fiends into the future to allow him to be revived. So, how does any of this work exactly? Garland was sent into the past when he was defeated. That much I'm willing to believe. But how did the fiends come to exist in the present in the first place? Because they were sent to the present from the past, right? But when Garland first died, the fiends would not have been there because he would not have first gone to the past to put them in the present. However, seeing as the fiends exist in the present, clearly he must have. How? And I may have missed something, but where's Chaos in the present? Perhaps one may speculate that the Garland who exists in the present is simply Chaos powered down by time or something to that effect, but dialogue from Princess Sarah and the King insinuates that he was more or less just an ordinary man who fell to villainy. Hence why 4 random raging adventurers who are able to take care of him as an odd job favor to the king. If Garland in the present is not yet Chaos, where is Chaos in the present? Can a giant primordial monster man named Chaos age and die? I do not know. And speaking of things I do not know, the game is also unclear about the conclusion. During your trip to the past, you and your Warriors of Light slay the 4 fiends in the past and Chaos himself, breaking off the time loop and preventing any more monsters from being sent to the present. The Warriors of Light are returned to the present thereafter, and the game states the Warriors' actions are regarded only as legend. I assume this is implying that your actions basically undid the last 2,000 years of history, as this time now occurs without any fiends or any chaos. However, if this is the case, why would there be any legend at all? The prophecy about the Warriors of Light would not exist, as the crystals would no longer need their light restored. Is Garland, the human, the rogue knight, still around in the present? Again, I could not tell you. Roll credits. You know, I often hear this sentiment that Final Fantasy got kind of carried away, lost up its own asshole with Final Fantasy VII onwards with regards to how these games approach story. And to that, I would say, look at how this franchise began with storytelling. Games like Final Fantasy VIII and 13 were the natural next step from whatever the fuck was happening here, not any sort of abnormal or unexpected development. More cohesive and tight storylines like Final Fantasy VI or 10 are the outliers here, not the rule. But now I'm going on a tangent. I just want to empathize that this story is the foundation upon which the rest of these games have built going forward. God fucking help us. So gameplay, I think this is probably where the game is at its weakest in 2023, and in my opinion, this is also probably going to be the least interesting thing to talk about. Unlike the story, the gameplay really is as basic as it seems here. If you're watching this video, you know how this goes. You've got 4 heroes in a column, you decide their actions one at a time, they all play out according to their speed, along with those of the monsters, repeat until either the enemy is dead or you are. Here, physical attackers are extremely powerful, and in my opinion, offensive magic is not, so the strategy does tend to be rather simple. Hit shit as hard as you can, heal and buff as you need to. I will never really criticize a game like this for being unbalanced. No matter what, there's always going to be a most effective tactic available. And, the ability to choose your own difficulty by having easily accessible options to make things easier or harder for yourself, besides just picking some artificial difficulty mode of, normal mode or Final Fantasy mode, I think is great. You want an easy time, have at least 2 physical attackers. You want a hard time, try a whole party of magic users. This is the same method of difficulty selection you'll see nowadays in games like Dark Souls or Shovel Knight, and you can easily see what your best options are, and you decide how to take advantage of them or handicap yourself. In my opinion, this is the best way to handle difficulty in a video game. However, in this game's case, and what this amounts to in a normal playthrough is that you just kind of sit back and spam your physical attacks in auto battle for 10 hours until the credits roll. Initially, there's some fairly challenging dungeons, which will frankly push your shit in with status effects and high damage versus your very limited healing options, but as the game progresses, you're going to become exponentially stronger and dungeons often become shorter in turn. It's a classic example of a downward difficulty curve. The gameplay is fun enough and intuitive, and fucking over these giant bosses with your ridiculously powerful buffs and equipment is pretty fun, but with the low difficulty and simple strategies, things get repetitive fairly quickly. Now, finally, we get to the presentation, and in my opinion, this was by far the highlight of the original game, and clearly Square Enix understood this going into this remaster here. Uematsu's composition for the original Final Fantasy are as melodic, catchy, and memorable as any of your favorite classic tracks from Koichi Sugiyama, Koji Kondo, or anyone else, and the arrangements present in this game could not be better. Personally, my time with this remaster peaked upon simply walking out into the overworld for the first time and hearing this game's arrangement of the main theme. I'm well aware some nostalgia of mine is probably coloring my judgment here, but these kind of full-budget orchestral scores are the easiest shortcut for a game like this to win points with me no matter what, and they did a killer job with it here. Now, beyond the music, there are, of course, the visuals. I am well aware many fans would have preferred a similar approach to what Square Enix is currently doing with Dragon Quest III HD 2D, and frankly, that's kind of what I wanted too when I first saw this reveal. However, that sort of over-the-top full remake approach is clearly not what Square Enix is going for here, and I'll put a pin in that for a later video about the Pixel remaster set as a whole, separate from the individual games. But for now, I'll just say I think Square Enix did a good job retaining the style of the original, while updating it with the Pixel remaster's more uniform look. It's impressive how this game and Final Fantasy VI can look so similar while still retaining their own individual styles. All things considered, this Pixel remaster is by far the best way to play this classic, a sentiment I'm curious I will maintain as I move through the rest of this series. If, like myself, you grew up with an earlier version of this game and are in the mood for a quick 10-hour romp through memory lane, this is the best way to go about it. If you've never played any version of this game before and are curious enough to do so, this is the version to play it. However, as a game on its own merits in a vacuum, is this game worth your time in the year 2023? I'm inclined to say yes, as long as you're in the right mood. It's a short, sweet, and rather lax adventure, where what you see is more or less what you get, not a huge commitment, but not one with huge payoffs or highs either. I'd call this JRPG comfort food. If you're uninitiated, save it for a rainy day when you just need something nice and familiar. If what you're looking for is a more layered and challenging experience for the open-minded, come back next time where we'll be taking a look at Final Fantasy II. Hello, thank you for making it to the end of this video. Not really sure what to put here since this is the only video I have at the moment, But you can take my little Twitter and my Backlog D page, I guess, if you want to take a look at that. Our current plans at the moment are to make one video for each of the Pixel remasters and maybe a little bonus video just covering my thoughts on some of the choices regarding these as a whole and how they were advertised, how they were released, and maybe I'll throw in a little all-in-one edit of everything if I really want to milk it and see if there's any interest in any of that. If you have any suggestions or you'd like of what you'd like to see from me or any thoughts you'd like to share on the game itself, I'd love to hear it. But other than that, again, thank you for watching, and I hope you stick around for what's to come.